Everybody say y'all get down.
All right, here we go. You want to make your way back here? That would be great. And you've all had a chance to meet Madison. Let me introduce to you Mark Savan, who is the Executive Director of Arizona End of Life Options. We'll introduce Mark and let him go from there. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mark Savan.
Thanks for having me. David, thank you for having me. Madison, thank you for sharing a little time. And I also want to thank Penny Davis, who kind of made the connection here and is manning our table in the back. So thank you, Penny. Thank you all for staying here and listening to us. A little bit about our organizations. We're called Arizona End of Life Options. And if I really just take what Madison said about compassion and choices, that's really what we're about. We are specific, though, to the state of Arizona. So we're an all-volunteer organization. I'm based in Scottsdale, but we have people all throughout the state. And our mission is very much the same as Madison described, compassion and choices. We, however, are focused solely on the state of Arizona. And we can talk a little bit, depending on the questions, about what the status of medical aid in dying and end-of-life options are in the state of Arizona. I would, the one ask that I have of you is, and I'm going to go back, I'm going to quote David from about an hour and 10 minutes ago. If you are interested in being an active participant rather than a spectator in the quest to make medical aid in dying legal in Arizona, then I would ask that you sign up on our list that Penny is keeping in the back table there. That will get you on our email distribution list. You'll get our monthly newsletter, but then you'll also be involved when we have calls to action, things like writing to legislators, writing to news outlets to advocate for more choices for end-of-life options. Very consistent with all the things that Madison was talking about. So with that, thanks again for having me. So the status of medical aid in dying in Arizona, we have there have been bills introduced into both chambers of the Arizona State Legislature every year since 2016, and to both the House and the Senate, and then 26 times since 2006. Those bills have never gotten out of committee. They've never gotten a hearing. Okay. Now, public opinion, we did public opinion survey. It goes back a little bit. It was January of 2022. Arizona registered voters, 13% of Arizonans oppose medical aid in dying, 13%. 60% support, 27% are unknown, undecided. You know, as Madison was talking about, this isn't an issue that gets talked about kind of lightly. It doesn't get talked about in popular outlets a lot, although that is changing. So very little opposition. At a personal level, and I'll quote my colleague from a similar organization in Ohio, medical aid in dying and compassionate end-of-life care is a personal issue with a political solution, and the politics is where things break down. So we've never made it anywhere really here in Arizona, despite introducing bills pretty much every year, okay, in recent history. These bills, the laws that we're introducing, it's called an Oregon model. Oregon is the first place that this was legal. It's been legal the longest, and all the things that Madison described up here a little bit earlier about what's involved in it, having to take the medication, that's basically the Oregon model. So this is the law. The bills that have been introduced in Arizona would provide rights and options for people very similar to what people currently have in Oregon, in California, and really in states all around Arizona. California, New Mexico, Colorado, it's all legal. So that's what we're trying to do, is get that here in Arizona. And we've...
And say, is there a reason for not supporting it?
So it is, the question is, what do the politicians say? Let me just talk about one more thing about the public opinion poll. So a majority of people support it. A majority of Democrats support it. A majority of Republicans support it. A majority of progressives support it. A majority of conservatives support it. Okay? Age groups, ethnicity, all of that. The only group, the only segment in there who didn't support it, Madison mentioned this before, are people who go to religious service once or more per week. Okay? That's the only group that doesn't support it. So, I've had plenty of conversations. Why don't the politicians support it? Politically, Republicans cannot support it. It's political suicide for a Republican politician to support it. I've had several conversations with Republican legislators. These are Republican with a capital R legislators who've said, and the one in particular, he's like, look, man, I get it. I just watched my grandfather go through this. It was horrible. I'm with you. You gotta get me a way to get there politically because I'm gonna get killed if I support this. Let me tell you, and Madison, this is a long answer to your question,
that's fine.
but another thing specifically. So last year, right, we've been introducing bills every year since 2016. We're finally, okay, you know, the old definition of insanity, keep doing the same thing over and over. What we said last year is, let's try something different, right? Let's try something smaller than a medical aid in dying bill. If it's a journey of 1,000 miles, let's just try and take the first step. So we introduced the bill to clarify rights on voluntary cessation of eating and drinking. Madison mentioned this before. VSET, voluntary stopping eating and drinking, right? Which is legal. I could choose not to eat or drink today. You know, it's completely legal. But there is one part of the Arizona revised statutes that says, and it enunciates and outlines patients' rights. And there is one clause in there that says, nothing in here authorizes assisted suicide. So some people, some facilities, were looking at that and saying, no, we can't support you or your mother or your father in their desire to stop eating because it's against this aspect of the law. All we did, we introduced a bill to clarify that ambiguity. We got a Republican to sponsor that bill. As soon as the Center for Arizona Policy found out that he was sponsoring that bill, they threatened to primary him. And so he dropped it. Okay? So I'm an independent, okay? We are a nonpartisan organization, but the fact of the matter is, at this point in time, in the state of Arizona, Republican legislators are really it's almost impossible for them to support this. That's what we hear.
And if I can add, having dealt with Kathy Herod on a numerous occasions, she's the head of
Center for
Arizona Policy, and we had a lot of work overcoming Kathy's influence on the LGBTQ plus issue. But she represents the evangelical community here in Arizona. And so, as Madison mentioned earlier, that is one of the huge roadblocks between the Roman Catholic opposition and the evangelical opposition, headed by Kathy Herod and folks. It makes it really difficult. So, questions?
A basic one, just how many states currently have that? Yeah.
So, I'm back on. 10 states and the District of Columbia. So, if memory doesn't fail me, and you'll help me, Oregon, Washington, Montana, California, Colorado, New Mexico, New Jersey, Vermont. I'm missing two more. Not New York, not Massachusetts yet. No. I said Montana, right?
That's pretty good, though. That's a pretty good list.
And the District of Columbia, Delaware, I think just came on.
That's
Yeah,
right, Delaware.
Delaware, Maine, not Vermont, but not Maine. Yeah. So yes, 10 states and the District of Columbia, of all the states. So as I said in my sermon, I do believe from the statistics that Mark, knew it starts with the M just like my name. Yeah. But that Mark stated, the public is there. The public is there. And what Mark didn't say is, well, he's talked about the primary, but it's also the money. That's where it hurts. You've got all these politicians who read the polls. You would think if one person got up and ran on medical aid and dying and got 60% of the vote, they could win the election. So, at some point, someone's going to do that because it is a bipartisan, nonpartisan issue supported across the political perspective.
I just have a comment. So I talked to some people about, there is on Amazon Prime a documentary about, I say assisted suicide, but that's not right. So
No, medical aid and dying.
medical aid and dying, and I'm pretty sure that's the way they say it, but it's called Take Me Out Feet First. So it's about 8 episodes. I watched it. I thought it was fascinating and very informative.
Yeah.
It took away a lot of fear about the process, and it had a lot of facts and data, and so I would highly encourage that. And the other thing is just personal experience. My grandmother was on a feeding tube for about 7 years at the end of her life. And so she was about 84 or 82 and broken her hip in a nursing home, opted for the not eating. And not my father, who is her son, but his older sister, who was the primary caretaker, decided that a feeding tube would be the best. And so for 7 years, she lingered, on her back in a nursing home. So really encourage everyone, like you said, talk to your children and make sure they all know. And it was a horrible kind of suffering for her. So
Yeah.
you said it very well today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And there's a lot of popular culture that's starting to talk about medical aid and dying. Any Frankie and Grace fans? So she had a friend that was famous for her parties, and she's having her last party. No one knows why these parties are great. Why was the last party? She had cancer, and at the end of her party, she was going to ingest the medication, and she asked Lily Tomlin's character to, mix it for her, help her. And so she had the dilemma that many of us would have, but went through with it, and so popular culture is starting to talk about this. And I like to say, I'm going to be at my own funeral. That's my plan. I want to hear what y'all have to say about me. And then at the end of the service, I'll take the medication, and then you can take me to the cemetery.
And Angela, is she the local representative for Compassion and Choices?
Yes.
So we were in conversation this week with Angela, who is the local representative of Compassion and Choices, who works with Mark with Arizona End of Life Options. And we are arranging to have a workshop here with Compassion and Choices, where we're going to watch one of these movies and have conversations. So we will let you know about that. That'll be coming up after the first of the year. So there'll be more on this to come.
While you're walking the mic over there, please take all of the literature from Compassion and Choices, because I can't take it on the plane with me. Take a stack and give it to your neighbors. We got pens and clips and great swag. Yeah.
My question is, are you getting any pushback from medical doctors who it seems like their mission is to prolong life as long as possible in no matter what circumstance, even for brand new babies and also at the end of life? Are you getting any pushback there?
So one of the important victories along the way to authorization in many states is getting the medical societies, associations, to be neutral. So yes, early on, the opposition was exactly as you described it. Our mission is to heal. If we do this, we're betraying our Hippocratic oath. But many of the medical societies have moved their position to neutral, which allows their own members to participate to the extent of their own conscience. And so that's as much of a victory. I don't know if there are any that have endorsed it, but if they can go neutral, that clears the way.
And to that, and specific to Arizona, their ARMA is the Arizona Medical Association, and they just hosted a town hall to evaluate and update their positioning on medical aid and dying. Our medical director, a woman named Evan Pulver, she's based out of Flagstaff, was in attendance at that and is working through that organization. So as Madison said, a neutral stance from a medical association is a complete victory on this, and that's what we're looking for. They're currently, it's a very unclear and secretive process that ARMA is going through to decide on this, but they are currently evaluating their policy, and we feel good about getting a neutral stance from that.
Mark
question?
and Madison,
yeah.
could you say a little bit about the resources that are on your websites? Because there are a lot of things that people can access to get people started on these.
So one of the books that we have, are we out of the English version, Gail? You said? Well, we have a book called, that helps you write your advanced directive. And it asks you the questions that you need to answer for yourself. It has forms in there that you can amend to your state. But it's easier, actually. I know a lot of us are paper and pen people, but you can fill out your advanced directive on our website. And it will be specific to your state. You can download it. And so I encourage you to go to our website to fill out your advanced directive if you haven't already done so. Also, as I was mentioning to someone earlier, we have what we call the dementia tools. Now, people with dementia are not eligible for medical aid in dying, but trying to respond to the overwhelming demand from the families of people with dementia. I know Dad didn't want to live like this. I know Mom didn't want to live like this. What can we do? It encourages you to put in writing. It's not binding, but it helps you clarify again for your family, and they can share it with the institutions or the settings in which they're being cared for, what you want. It's just the first small step toward addressing the dementia issue. And many other resources, videos of previous workshops and lectures on almost every aspect of medical aid in dying. It's a great website with a lot of resources.
Yeah, it is a great website, and I'm talking about the Compassionate Choices website. And in fact, a lot of what, again, I'm going to do another pitch for signing up for the list here, because if you do that, then what I will do is send out an email to everyone who signs up there with some links from today about what we've been talking about today. Several of those links link to some of these resources on the Compassionate Choices website, and some of the ones that Madison just mentioned. So we've got that. We have links to the Arizona Attorney General's Department where you can register your end-of-life documents. Okay? We've got some links to resources about, and again, I'm going back to something Madison talked about earlier, how to start these conversations with your family, your friends, your caregivers. There's some nice links on there, nice resources that we have on there. I just asked Madison about this, the book that he mentioned earlier. I'll put a link to get that book on the email that I send out. It's an affiliate link, which means that if you order it, Arizona End of Life Options, I think we get about 8 cents for every book that's ordered, but every little bit helps.
Finish strong.
A question, and then we'll come here.
Well, some of us are here in the winter, and some of us have a different state in the summer. How does it work when you're from one state to the other? How does this work?
Well, each state has their own residency requirements, and some of the medical aid in dying laws have slightly different residency requirements than your normal, what makes me a resident of Arizona. I know in California, if you live in California for more than 6 months of the year, you're considered a resident for tax purposes. So a lot of people stay up to that, 6-month mark. But it's written into most of the laws. I was looking at it particularly for New Mexico. So for medical aid in dying in New Mexico, they don't want this made tourism. So you have to be an official resident 12 months of living in New Mexico. So as one approaches that time in your life, you might need to move to New Mexico until they have the law here in Arizona. Any of you remember Brittany Menard? So Brittany Menard was a California resident that had to move to Oregon, establish residency in order to access medical aid in dying. And she went public with her story. And you can see the YouTube videos. She was a young woman in her late 20s, just married, everything to live for, and had brain cancer. And so her public story really moved California to pass the law. You know, one of our residents has to leave in order to get health care.
There are 2 states that do not have residency requirements, Vermont and then Oregon, so more appropriately for this. So as Madison mentioned, for the other states you do have to be a resident, whatever that means for the various states, but probably geographically speaking around here, Oregon is a place where you do not need to be a resident. Now there are requirements. You can't go to Oregon, you can't bring the medication back into Arizona, but you don't have to be establish any type of residency in Oregon. There are some other requirements. Again, I'll have a link to that in the email that I send out. But interestingly enough, New Jersey was just trying to put a resolution through to eliminate their residency requirement, and that was defeated, so they still have a residency requirement.
And I looked up New Mexico, but you all are just as close to California. And I don't know offhand what the California residency requirement is. I don't think it's 12 months, though.
I don't know. There is a residency requirement. I don't know what it is, though.
Yeah, I'll see if I can look it up while we're...
Yeah, just the thought of having to move at the end of your life when you're sick.
Yeah.
50 years ago, my father died miserably from cancer, and I got involved in California in the beginning of the first hospice program in the South Bay. And I still can't believe that haven't made enough progress in this area. And we're in our 80s, he's almost 90, and I think about it. Sorry. Well, he looks great. Look at this. Hiking every day. He'll probably outlive me, even though I'm younger. Anyway, we were able to, when we moved to Arizona, I just realized that on this issue it was a really big mistake. I wanted to get out of crowded California and enjoy the heat, and without thinking, oh, I may not have any choices in this or any access to things. So I'm always stashing whatever medication I can get out of it. The problem is you put it in the fridge, you can't get it to last very long. Years later, it's no good. But anyway, I'm just glad to see, I'm a member of Compassion and Choices.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would really like, I just appreciate any effort that's being made. And do you think just writing to our legislators would help in this issue? Does it come to them enough to know that somebody in the legislature might work on this more?
Well, writing to your legislators certainly does not hurt. Yeah. It doesn't hurt. You know, it helps. It can help sometimes. I mean, some people have just had their mind made up and they're not going to support it, or they can't support it if they want to continue their political career. So it doesn't. It can only help. It doesn't hurt to write to your legislators.
Okay. I just want to say, elections coming up, the only way that's going to change is if we get more Democrats into the legislature. It's going to drag on, and every other state will have done it, and we'll be 51st or 50th in this as we are in education. So
we're number one in the things we're 50th at.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So vote for a Democrat when you can. Sorry, that's all I can think of to do.
I want to know if Illinois is on this.
We are fighting hard in Illinois. I mean, I keep saying that. We are at the tipping point. Illinois is close. New York is close. Maryland, actually, I think it's Maryland and another state, the legislature actually passed the law and the governor vetoed it. So we're close, and we're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep going back to those states.
I'm from Illinois, and my husband passed away 7 years ago.
Sorry.
Bad shape with dementia, heart problems, knee problems, and had sores on bed sores.
Yes.
Because they couldn't move him. He was large. He had been a football player. And they had medicine for him in a cabinet, and they'd come in and say, "Are you in pain?" No, he never, ever committed that he was ever in pain. Well, I knew he was.
Yeah.
And I said, "This is not right."
Yeah.
"Oh, we have it in the cabinet for him, but it has shortened his life." I said, "He is in
Yes.
pain.
Yes.
I see
Yes.
it daily."
Yes.
They gave it to him. I said,
Yes.
"What's this point of keeping him alive?"
Yeah.
He was blind at that part. He couldn't even watch TV and football.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm not going to move back to Illinois,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to stay here either. I'm not going to die like that.
I'm so sorry that happened. Yeah, now you've exposed a dirty little secret. Nurses have been medicating people to death for years. They just call it keeping them comfortable. So it's been happening, but this brings it out of the shadows.
And one thing I want to add, there are a lot of states where there's been political and legislative momentum toward this, but the opposition is strong and emboldening and digging in as well. And in fact, in West Virginia, there's a ballot measure to put a constitutional amendment in the West Virginia Constitution that specifically outlaws medical aid in dying. Okay, so it's, the battle is on, and as emboldened as one side is, the other side gets equally as emboldened. So it continues to be a fight for rights.
I have a question.
Yeah.
My husband has dementia, and with the exponential increase in the number of people who have dementia or will have dementia, I'm wondering if there's a chance that there might be a change in the way the medical aid in dying program or structure can be changed to allow someone who's just been diagnosed to change their estate planning documents to allow a power of attorney to administer on their behalf. And if not, then why not? Because it's becoming a huge problem.
That we have looked at that question. It's not legal in the current environment. That a third party can't authorize. You have to have the capacity to make the request and to ingest the medication. And a third party participation, even a power of attorney, gets too close to what would be defined as euthanasia. So that's, again, ultimately, but in this current legal environment, yeah. I would encourage you to go to our website and look at the dementia tools, and they'll talk about, all the struggles that they have around trying to get our wishes honored. But you start with just writing them down.
Yeah, and on that point, I get asked that question a lot about Arizona, and I get calls and emails from people looking for support in that case. And rightfully so, there are a lot of safeguards in here in medical aid and dying laws to prevent abuse, but unfortunately those same safeguards can also limit the accessibility of this in cases like that. And from the more wide open that we make access to it, quite honestly, the more opportunity you get opposition to push back against it. So there is a political reality for us here in Arizona. We're just trying to get the Oregon model before we look at anything more expanded.
Hey, Mark, if you could maybe say a little bit about what people can do here other than signing up for the newsletter and writing to legislators about getting involved volunteer-wise, because maybe it would be good as we get more church people involved to go around to churches and to offer workshops and things like that. What kind of stuff are you doing in that kind of realm?
Sure. So our number, I'll go back to the public opinion polling results that I shared a little bit ago. 13% opposed. So there's hard to find anything that only 13% of people oppose. 60% support, which is an okay number, but it's not great. Our opportunity is that 27% unknown, undecided. So our main opportunity there is to drive awareness of this issue to people, and we believe that of those 27%, once people understand what it is we're talking about as far as medical aid in dying and how that plays in the broader scope of end-of-life options, that a very large portion of those people will support it. Our support numbers will get up in the upper 70s and maybe even higher. So it's about getting the word out. It's about doing things like this. So from a volunteer opportunities, for Arizona end-of-life options here, we're looking for a ground game, right? We're looking to get out here. Opportunities like this are the best things we can do. More people, as Penny did, identifying these opportunities, and then more people executing, standing up here on these opportunities. We also have volunteer openings for our organization. Again, we're an all-volunteer organization on things like public relations, social media, running, the socials, the Facebook pages and all those, just to get the word out to people and find people who are looking, researching this topic online. So we have a whole variety of those things to do, in addition to writing to legislators, call to action. We're not a big organization, but occasionally we do fundraising, so contributions there as well. But the main part would be getting to that 27% of people who are unknown, undecided, through things like this, through social media and electronic outreach. And we have lots of volunteer opportunities. If you come to our website, get on our list, those will be made apparent to you.
I think we have time for one more question.
Mark, options. What if someone needs care today? What can you do in Arizona? What are the options?
As far as end of life or medical aid in dying? Yes. Medical aid, so that I think your best option in Arizona is to work with Oregon, because you don't have to be a resident. Now, you're going to have to go to Oregon. You're going to have to see a physician in Oregon. You're going to have to obtain the medication in Oregon. Technically, you need to take the medication in Oregon, but you do not need to establish any type of residency. So if you are looking for this as an Arizonan today, Oregon's your best option. I mean, Vermont is as well. It's just not, it's further away.
So I'm looking online here. I can't vouch for this website, coalitionccc.org, Coalition for Compassionate Care of California. I don't know them, but they ask the question in their frequently asked questions, what do I need to do to prove that I am a California resident? Patients must be a California resident in order to use the End-of-Life Option Act. Under the law, California residency must be demonstrated through any, that's their wording, any of the following means: possession of a California driver license or other identification issued by the state of California, a California ID, it's not hard to get. B, registration to vote in California. C, evidence that the person owns or leases property in California. D, filing California tax return for the most recent tax year. Now, they're proposing these as any one of these, not all of these. But then you have to look into the particular requirements for getting a driver's license. But I don't think it's going to be that hard to get a driver's license if you have an address in California, and they're not investigating whether it's your cousin's address or your best friend's address. So officially, he's correct. Unofficially, if you really are interested, what I've heard is that any of these in this website, and there might be others, you can get around the California residency. And then again, it's going to be up to the doctor to accept your credentials, or the health system if you're in Kaiser or what have you. So it's really going to be up to these, actual practitioners, because I don't think they're going to, I don't know to what degree they audit the residency of all the patients that access the law.
All right, one more question.
Because something Madison said reminded me of that. Having been through this fairly recently with my husband who had Alzheimer's, palliative care through hospice is, can sort of be what you're talking about. But if you choose a hospice, you need to ask them how they feel about this.
Yeah.
Because my husband was in and out of a particular very large hospice here for a couple of years. And finally we realized that they were going to continue to treat his pneumonia, they were going to treat his COVID, And so finally, we did switch hospices, and that hospice doctor, when I asked him how he felt about it, he said, "How do you feel about it?" And I told him how our family felt about it, and he said, "Your family rocks." So so when my husband broke his hip and we had to decide what to do, he was more than happy to do palliative care, and then he didn't last very long. So
If I may add one thing to the final question. You mentioned Take Me Out Feet First. I forget which episode of that. It is, I can't imagine a better way to understand what the process looks like, but also the obstacles and pitfalls that one has to negotiate to go through the process. I forget which episode it is. Hopefully when you screen it, you'll watch that episode, because you are literally, the camera is in the room through the whole process, including the moment of passing. So it illustrates all of these things that need to be navigated, even in places where the law exists.
Yeah, right. That's right. And he said it's a final question, but not the final answer. Yeah. So, in response to your point about the physician and the hospices feeling differently, maybe you all have heard it, this phrase, but pneumonia used to be called the old man's friend. Old man's friend. And also, I was recently hearing someone talk about how we have medicalized death. 2 generations ago, Grandpa was sitting in the living room, in the parlor, dying, and then dead. And then you take him to the church and bury him in the church. And we want to get back to where death is part of life. That's the other phrase. In coming to this movement, that's the light that went on for me. Death is part of life. It's not on the other side. And so we should live our deaths with the same intentionality with which we live our lives. It's the final act of life.
And I'll just add to that some of you will remember when houses used to have parlors.
Yeah.
Do you remember? How many of your houses have parlors now? Right? That's because the parlor was only used when you laid a loved one out to be visited, right? And so the real estate industry said, we don't like having parlors anymore. So what did they change the parlor to? The living room.
The living room instead of the dining room.
So they literally took the parlor, which is where you would lay your loved one out after death, and changed the name to living room, and that was the beginning of commercial funeral parlors, right, where it was outside the home, because you used to have a mortician prepare, and then you would be delivered to your home for the visitation and everything, but it was outsourced then. So we have tried to isolate ourselves as a culture so much from the process of death, and that's something that if anybody can talk about it with rational and intentional hope, it's the church. And we need to be the ones talking about this to reclaim what it means to embrace the whole of one's life, which includes our passing. So I really am grateful to Madison and Mark for taking the time today to share this with us. Let's hear it for Compassionate Choices in Arizona End of Life Office.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. More info to come. Make sure to sign up in the back and to take
Yes, take all the swag.
stuff. Yeah.